Welcome, Daniella, also known as my mother, to the Dating Intentionally podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you here as well. My first question for all my guests is what are you being intentional about lately?
Wow, I wasn't expecting that question. I'm being intentional about walking every morning, like getting
Okay.
up and out of bed, not lying in bed for a long time, scrolling through social or doing like my bumblebee, but getting outside, getting fresh air, breathing, and just moving my body.
Love it. That's a great thing to be intentional about. Very common answer. A lot of people are
Oh, really?
walking as they're yeah. So we're all doing it together, which is great. So I want to jump right in and just kind of give listeners some context. How old were you when your divorce was finalized?
Oh, how old was I when I think I was 45?
Okay.
Yeah,
So in
40.
that period of your life, like where was your head at in terms of dating? Like your papers were signed, you were done, all, ready to go. What were you feeling about dating in that time?
Okay, well, I need to back up a little bit because what was a little bit more unusual is that from the time we were separated, your dad and I, until we got divorced was 3 years, which so it was a very long period of time compared to others who, I don't know, maybe take 6 months or a year for the process to finalize. So I was already well into my journey of definitely separation. And so, but signing the documents is a definite different feeling. It's more complete. So my head was in relief, I guess.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so wait, were you dating before it was finalized?
So in that 3 year period, I definitely went on dating apps very lightly, and we can get into,
Yeah.
sort of how things evolved. But yeah, I definitely went on dates during the separation period of 3 years. And then also, what changed for me was I moved to New York City. So that was also part of my transition.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Did you date in New Jersey compared to New York and what was that like?
Yeah, totally different. Yeah, I mean, I was on the same apps. I went on Match. I think I was on JDate. Ultimately, I met my now husband on OkCupid, but I don't think that was around when I first started dating. Yeah, but we lived in the suburbs. So dating in the suburbs felt different. It skewed to a certain type of person. The people that I met out in New Jersey were, I guess they were like me, they were dads, they had kids, they lived in houses, they had a suburban life. But then, going to New York City, there's so much more diversity. So I met people who were in all different stages, even though the age bracket was the same,
Mhm.
very different cast of characters.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So now that you've caught us up a little bit about kind of how your dating journey post divorce or separation started, what were your feelings? Like, were you nervous, excited? What was your mindset going into it after being married for or with someone for 20 years?
Yeah. So I think at first I was curious and excited. I had thought about getting separated for a while, so I think my mind was already there. This wasn't abrupt. So I was curious as to how it was going to feel, but I also felt really weird and out of sorts
Okay.
because also I think realizing when I got separated, I was 42 and I had two teenage kids. So the weird thing initially was going on these dating apps, and I went a little younger in my bracket. So I think I did 39 to 47, let's say.
Mhm.
So I would chat with men who were, let's say, 39, 40, 41. As soon as they found out that I had two teenage kids, it was like, well, hold on, I haven't even been married the first time yet. Like we're in completely different stages of life. So I was like, wow, this is going to be really difficult because I already was married for 18 years. I have two teenage children, in high school, and then I'm meeting guys who have been doing whatever and haven't even been found their first partner.
Right.
So
Right.
that was a bit of a disconnect that I was surprised about and I wasn't anticipating.
So after kind of meeting a few or talking to a few of those guys, how did that change your approach? Like, what were you like, "Okay, I need to find" how did that inform who you were looking for?
Yeah, I think I moved the age bracket up a bit. Like, at first, when I was 42, at that time, I remember thinking, "Oh, 50, no, like, I'm not gonna date anyone who was a 5 before their age," and I think over time, that kinda shifted because I realized that, a 39 or 40-year-old just wasn't gonna be maturity-wise, unless they were in the exact same position, they weren't gonna be a good fit for me. And then as my dating evolved, I came up with certain ground rules for myself, and I think I had to go through some of the experiences of, "Oh, okay." And that happened when I was in the city too. Like, I'm dating this guy, we're the same age, but he never had kids. So or I would date some once I was divorced, I would date someone who was still separated, and that wasn't a good match. So I kind of came up with just sort of non-starters, non-negotiables for myself as time evolved and I had more dates and more experiences to see how I was gonna feel on
Can you
each of
tell us
them.
some of those non-starters?
Yeah, of course. So I think one of them was, if someone was single and had never been married, there were dates where I just went out and had fun at the beginning, and that was totally fine. I wanted to just have fun. And I found myself in some situations that were uncomfortable because I had been out of it for so long. I mean, just even going back further, I got married in my early 20s. So I wasn't out and about dating a lot. Before I got married. So I was a bit out of my element, like dating men who were in their late 30s who just wanted to have a good time. It just was such a disconnect. So that profile kind of quickly, after a couple of
Okay.
experiences, I'm like, yeah, this feels weird. I'm not someone who wants to party in their mid 30s. I've got two kids at home and I'm a mom.
Mhm.
I identified very much as a mom and as
Mhm.
sort of a grown up. I think then, like I said, as I went on, I didn't want to date anyone who wasn't a father. That came after a long time, but I remember I was on a date in New York City with a guy. He was great. We were the same age, but he never had kids. And I remember you called me. We were out getting snacks. We were like going to do a picnic and we were buying snacks at Whole Foods or something. And you called and I was like, "Oh, do you mind if I pick up this call? It's my daughter." And he looked really annoyed. And I was like, "Oh, okay, this isn't gonna work because I am always gonna pick up the phone. Even if I'm on a date, I'm always gonna pick up the phone to my kids." So that was the second one. And then I would say post-divorce, I went on a date with someone in New York again who was separated, and I came to find out in the middle of the date that he was living in his wife's basement.
Oh,
And I was like, "Yeah, this isn't
yeah.
gonna work," and I realized that there was a difference between someone who was divorced and someone who was separated, and I one of my non-starters then was they had to be divorced, and then putting together that
Right.
with they had to have kids.
And if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I'm separated, I'm living in my ex's basement," like, just know, like, everyone has their own preferences, like, this isn't, like, a dig to you at all, and everyone has different stages, like, you also you were in the house with my dad for a while during your separation, you also had a period in that, so it's like, just so you
Oh,
know, if you're in that
absolutely.
stage right now, like, it's okay. You're not, like, undateable.
100%. I mean, divorce and the living situation, especially with kids, happens all different ways. There's no judgment about that. But I wasn't really dateable to a certain extent when I was going home to my kids and my soon to be ex husband. It gets complicated in terms of sleeping arrangements and what you're doing
Oh,
and
yeah.
just long-term dating. It's not comfortable. And I'll be honest, when after I was divorced, when I had my own place, which was the first time I had my own place, since I never had my own place
Right, yeah, you
actually.
never did,
Maybe
yeah.
maybe for a few months after college, because I met your dad like 3 months after I graduated from college. I had a couple of apartments in New York.
Mhm.
But when I had my own place, there was a sense of freedom However, you were in college, but your brother was still in high school and he was going back and forth, which is a common arrangement in divorced families. And I still didn't really feel fully comfortable dating at that time. For those two
Mhm.
years, when he was still in high school, I made it kind of my own rule. And again, this is my preference. I'm not saying there's no judgment if people decide to do something different than this, but dating wasn't my priority. I wanted, him, your brother, to feel like I was always there for him. And because where I lived was only 4 miles away from where his dad lived, and then he got a car in high school, I realized that he could stop by at any time. So I didn't feel really free,
Right.
to bring people home and just kind of like hang out with a date. So I dated, but very lightly. And I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just made up my mind that until he went to college, I really didn't want anything serious. I didn't want to introduce anybody. And I needed that break too.
Right. And we will get into the introducing kids topic, but I do want to first explore your intentions because it sounds like you had different intentions at different stages. You just said you weren't looking for anything serious while, my brother was still in high school and like doing the back and forth thing makes sense. And then you got your own place and that was a little easier. So when the divorce was finalized, what were your intentions? Like, did you know you wanted to get remarried? Did you know you wanted to eventually move in with someone? Like, where was your head at with that?
I think I really wanted to have a successful partnership. I wasn't thinking about moving in. I was open, I was definitely open and enthusiastic about having a second marriage. But I think in my mind, I think a lot of people feel this way. It's like there's a failure. And I wanted to feel what it felt like to have a successful marriage and partnership, and no one really understands what that is. The second time is very different from the first time, especially when you have kids. But I knew I wanted a partner. I didn't see myself like just being a lone wolf and hanging out for a long time. I went like headlong into dating with the intention of meeting a long-term relationship. Like I think in my
Mhm.
profile, I definitely put long-term relationship.
Right. Did you like being single?
I did. I mean, I liked it in New York City. I didn't love it in the suburbs because suburban life tends to, focus more on couples. And that's a whole nother topic, probably, of just, you know, couples society. And some friends, stop inviting you, and you really understand, like, who your friends are going to be going forward. Maybe some friends go with one partner and the other.
Mm.
So, I didn't love being single in the suburbs, but once I moved to New York City, which I couldn't wait to do, I was so excited about that. I felt like it was where I belonged all the time. I dropped your brother off at college and the
Yeah.
next day moved to New York City. So
You were like, "I'm
I
out."
was I would say it was a whole package of
Mhm.
living the life that I wanted to live and I dreamt about for a really long time, just the energy of New York City and the feeling that anything was possible was just really energizing to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing just your positive view on being single. I do think there is just so much opportunity in being single after you've been in a relationship for a long time to do all those to exercise your freedom in a way that you've never been able to before, and I think if you've been single for a long time, you start to take it for granted, but there is nothing like that fresh out of a relationship you don't wanna be in energy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
No,
really
I mean,
doing
I
what you want.
remember, and you might remember this and you might not, but I went on my first international trip by myself right when I got separated. I went with a
Yeah, I
group.
remember.
I went to New Zealand and it felt weird. A lot about divorce feels weird and doesn't feel good, obviously, especially with kids. It's just nobody wants to get divorced when they get married, I don't think. So, but I think the positives of being single and also again living in the city, I had a lot of friends who were single, and I think I also choose people in my friend circle that even if they're in a couple, they don't mind leaving their partner at home and going out with a single friend, and I really valued that. And I think I'm also someone like you who's not afraid to go and eat by herself or go to the theater by herself or go to a concert by herself. I actually really revel in those opportunities because I end up talking to someone or I just end up reading a book. So I love to be alone and think about things that I can do that are my choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate, again, all these positive things about being single. And yeah, I think your location really does matter. And I would encourage people, if you can change up your environment when you're single, if you have the ability to, it's definitely worth thinking about if your environment doesn't serve the single life. Like this, like suburbia didn't do that for you in the way that New York City did. And I think living in a city does make it easier if you can swing it.
Yeah, and one of the things I did, and this is a very privileged thing to do, and again, realizing that not everyone has the resources to do this, but while we were living in New Jersey, we were doing the every other weekend thing with your dad. I didn't want to stay in New Jersey, so I would get an Airbnb in Manhattan and try out different neighborhoods, like with the idea that I was going to move
Hmm.
here one day, and I tried out different neighborhoods and I went on dates also. Like it was fun to be able to turn the zip code to New York City and see who else was out
Yeah.
there on the apps and set up dates for the weekend.
I want to talk about the apps for a second. So again, you met my dad on a blind date, right? A friend set up.
Right.
And so now you're in your 40s and you're using dating apps. What was that like in the beginning for you?
Well, I'm always curious about how things work. So I think I learned a lot about myself because, at the time, Match.com and some of the other ones had
Also,
this
wait,
like,
what year was this? Sorry, what year were you like 43, 45?
so we got separated in 2008.
Hmm.
We got officially divorced in 2011.
Okay, so that was like right when Instagram started. So dating apps weren't like the app on your phone wasn't really a thing in that year. You were using dating websites.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
definitely sitting at a desk
Yeah.
filling out questions on Match.com,
Right.
learning stuff about myself and just kind of like marveling at the process. And also, it was the excitement of, I think there was one app where you got like a match a day. I don't know which one that was. So it was kind of like, oh, I wonder, who I'm going to get matched with. Or like in the middle of work, I'd get a message from someone kind of giggle about it. So to me, it was kind of like entertainment, it was just kind of funny because also I
It's
wasn't,
novel, right?
yeah, and I
Yeah.
wasn't I wasn't fully dateable. I wasn't fully in a place where I could really get into a relationship. So it was kind of just like a funny side hobby. Not funny, but a side thing
But
that
I love this. I
got me
love this.
distracted from all the legal stuff that I was going through because again, 3 years, not for nothing, but it was, painful, it was litigious, and this was something that felt like a spark of hope of what my future would be like after this process was over.
I feel like I don't know, people listening would be like, "Oh, this is where Talia gets it from." Because I had such a similar attitude towards dating apps after, I had a 6-year relationship, obviously, through most of my 20s, but, like, I also was like, it's just a kind of at first, it was kind of a distraction. And I think this is what I wish more people would how I wish more people would view the dating apps as like it can just be for fun. It can just be an experiment. You're just kind of exploring and being open and curious. It doesn't have to be so heavy like any first message could be your future partner. Like no, just it's a person. Let's just see if you can even talk. Let's just see what happens if you message. That's the vibe.
Yes, and, I'm making the light side of it, but I had a lot of frustrating days
Okay.
or almost on, like, the edge of anger with these dating apps because, at some point after you're looking at all these profiles and you're getting messages or going through all the things that you talk about on your podcast and on Instagram, it's like, "Why didn't he call me back?" Or, "I didn't hear from him," or also, like, looking back, I think my communication style was very strange and probably a total mismatch for guys who were more like comfortable with dating because
What were
I
you doing?
because I was a business person, right? And so like if someone was like, "Oh, when do you want to hang out?" I'd literally like list Monday between 11:30 to
Oh,
on, Wednesday from like 5:30 to 7:45, like the way you would list out times for a meeting. And then I wouldn't hear from the person. Obviously, it's just
yeah.
that energy was not really fun.
When did you realize that wasn't the right tone
Pretty
in your
quickly,
okay.
pretty quickly.
See, at least you learn, you, like, figured out, like, "Okay, this doesn't get me the response I want. Maybe I should change something."
Right, right.
That's so funny. So
And yeah, people ghosting me or people bugging me who I didn't want to go out with, all of those things that were kind of annoying. And I went on and off the app so many times because it felt, especially in New York, it feels like you start seeing the same faces on multiple apps. And it's like, oh, there's nobody great on these things. Let me get off. And then I
mhm,
feel like they might feed you like the best person when you come back on, and then you get
yes,
hopeful again.
they
Like
do,
the
they
best
100%
looking, the
do.
best profile. I don't even know if they're real or not. But then it feels, and I think women feel this way maybe more than men do, but it feels like, wow, like I've run out of prospects. Like there's
Oh, yeah,
nobody.
I think a lot of women, any age, any stage, divorced, not div never married, feel that way. Yeah, so I would love to hear a little bit just a little about the vibe of, like, the guys you were meeting because, you were single in your early 20s. That's, like, a very different type of man in your dating pool compared to men in their 40s and 50s. So, what was the energy of these guys?
It was all so different. Like I said, in New Jersey, the vibe was a little desperate. It was a little like, I met a lot of people who were married for a significant amount of time, like I was. And I think they were a little desperate to something or get to the next relationship. I met a couple people who were widows, and there was like a sad energy that I didn't want to be part of at that time. I wanted a light, positive feeling. And, unfortunately, they had lost their love of their life. I just didn't feel like I had the capacity to
Mhm.
go there at that time. Once I got to New York, I mean, it's a whole variety of people. There's a lot of diversity here. So, they were just, I mean, I can't even answer that in like one. It's just because people are, like, for example, I met someone who was some kind of musician, and he took me to a jazz bar, and like he didn't have $10 to get in. And then I ended up paying for it. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, this is like he was cute and we had a great time and great energy together, but the starving artist or starving musician just wasn't going to be a good match for me. But I did appreciate the date. I think I went out
Mhm.
with him twice because I wanted to explore who I was at that time. I needed to figure out who I was because I only identified as, this person who was married to this other person who was a mother to two kids who lived in New Jersey. Everything was very, very linear.
Mhm.
And I didn't really know what I was looking for.
Right. It's okay. I think it's okay to embrace that. I think some people are nervous. They're like, I don't want to lead anyone on. I don't want to trip and fall into the wrong relationship, and it's like you're not going to, and it's okay to date when you don't know what you want as long as you are upfront that like maybe you're not in a place for something serious. That's okay. I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about how you met your husband, my stepdad. So, what made him stand out on OkCupid?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a great story, and it's an unusual story, but I think I was more in the frustrated zone of, I had gone on a lot of dates, and similar to you as well, I would come home and make notes about how I felt on
I didn't
each of
know that.
the dates. Yeah, and also this isn't really this is not your question, but I just want to add it in here is that I've had a formula for first dates. I found a bar 2 blocks from where I lived. I knew the bartender there, And I would set up a first date there so that, it could be a short date because you're having a drink. We're not having dinner. We're not going to see a movie or whatever. And within 2 minutes, I could be home. There were some dates, and I found this out the hard way. There were some dates where there was a lot of transportation involved, like going way out of the borough or even driving somewhere. And it just wasn't worth the time sometimes. And I was mad at myself. I remember once I missed my friend's party because I drove way out to Asbury Park or something to meet someone on a date. So I kind of got it just very efficient. And so in that mode, when I went on to OkCupid, when I met my now husband, I was like, okay, I want someone within walking distance. I pretty much don't even want to get on a train or they have to come to me. And also like age and height. Height is important to me.
You're tall. How tall are you?
I'm 5'8". I've gone out with people who are 5'8". I like men who are 6 feet or more. That's just my preference. So I plugged 6 feet or more, within, I don't know what radius. They had like a zip code thing with the radius. And I think 6 or 7 people popped up and he was one of them. And I went through each one. And he also had a dog on his profile picture, and I have a dog. And so I think I might have written to all 7 people. I reached
I
out.
love that.
Yeah. And it's like, what the hell? And I was not one I didn't want a pen pal. Some people, and my husband and I joke about it because he really liked the writing back and forth. So, we didn't because, I didn't want to. But I reached out to him, and it turned out that we realized we both lived on the same block.
Wild.
And he's 6'3". So it was like, wow, okay, this is
And he's
amazing.
younger, right? How many
He's,
years younger is he?
he's 2.5 years younger,
Okay.
which is fine. A certain amount younger, like 10 years younger,
Whatever.
I wouldn't have dated,
Yeah.
but that was great. And I remember you were living with me at the time. And we wrote a couple times back and forth. And then he said, I just really want to be transparent because I don't like dating multiple people at the same time. And I started dating someone exclusively, and I'm actually just about to take myself off of OkCupid. But let's exchange numbers since we're neighbors and we both have dogs. It turned out we were walking our dogs in the same park, but never saw each other because he was
Wild.
going early in the morning and I was going at a different time. So I was like, oh, that's a bummer, and we exchanged phone numbers. And then, like with all the dating, you have to just forget about it and just park it somewhere in a,
Mm.
in a lot of like, that's not
Yeah.
happening, okay, it seemed good, but that's not happening. And about a month later, I got a phone call, not even a text message, but a phone call. And I was like, hi. And he said, hi, this is Matthew. And I was like, Matthew who? He's like, oh, the guy from OkCupid, and I'm about to go for a dog walk in like 5 minutes. And since we're neighbors, I was, thinking maybe you were going for a dog walk. I was like, okay,
That's so bold. When I think about that, that is so bold. Like, wait, hold on. Like just calling after you've never talked on the phone. You haven't even texted. He's just like he could
no,
have been a spammer. Just calling. You picked up weirdly.
right.
Like, I don't know why. I feel like I would never pick up. And then just in the same phone call, just being like, I'm going out. Want to come with me? You've never met him. You've never talked to him on the phone.
No,
You've exchanged like 4 emails.
I know. And
Okay.
that was in 2013. So I
Right.
feel like the spam phone calls were not as prevalent then.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing.
But I was like, all right, sure. But it wasn't a date. And I was like,
No.
he's taken. So I didn't get dressed any special way. I didn't fix my hair. I just took the dog and went out. And he said, I'll be the one with the beautiful dog in the park or something like that. We met and we walked around for 15 minutes. And I remember I came back and I said to you, oh, darn, like he's so cute. And you said, Mom, just forget about it. He's taken. Just forget about it. Move on. I don't want to hear about it. I was like, oh, you're right. You're right. But then the next night, he texted again and said, I'm going for a dog walk. Are you? Something like that. And so the next night, I got a text and he said, I'm going for a dog walk. Do you want to come? And I was like, sure. So we went for another dog walk, and he was kind of flirting with me. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to say anything. This isn't a date. I'll just follow his lead. And basically, we went out for 4 or 5 dog walks, and I knew at that point he must not be seeing somebody else, but he didn't say anything, and then I think on the 5th dog walk, he was like, "Well, I haven't, I'm not seeing that woman anymore." I'm like, "You're joking." It was the opposite.
Shocker.
Yeah, shocker. So we went on our first real date, and now we're married.
Amazing.
But it wasn't so
Yeah, we'll get to that. So I do want to touch on the big topic, which is everyone wanted to ask about introducing kids. So tell me your thought process around introducing your kids to the person you're dating and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, you were living with me at the time, but I think, it really depends on the kid. And I think in the case of my 2 kids, it was 2 very different approaches. So you're extremely open. You kind of followed the story from the beginning in the first dog walk. So I felt extremely comfortable introducing you without any pressure of like, this is someone significant in your life. And, you
I don't
know,
remember meeting him for the first time. I'm
I
sorry.
don't
I don't
remember. I
remember
don't remember. I think
where.
it was so casual. I think it was so
Yeah.
casual, and he had a child at home too, who I probably met casually, pretty soon after we started dating, but it didn't seem like a big event. It just seemed like, "This is my friend," it wasn't like, "This is my potential partner," or anything like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, did you guys talk about it beforehand?
We didn't talk about it with you. We did
No,
talk.
with each other.
No, I know. We didn't talk regarding
Oh,
you. We
okay.
didn't talk about
I'm
it.
the
We
same.
didn't.
I know, I know.
No, it wasn't a statement. I understand that introducing children can be a statement about where you're at in your relationship. In terms of introducing him to you, it wasn't at all a statement. In fact, I remember when you met him the first time, you were doing improv.
Oh, yeah. I
You
remember now.
invited me to the last performance of your improv, and I asked you if I could invite him to go, and you said yes. So, and I had flowers for you, and it was like, "Hey, here's some flowers, and this is Matthew." It was like, you didn't care. It was very casual, or maybe you
Wasn't
did care.
Alex there?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. Okay, I do remember this, and it was very casual.
Did you care?
No, I think your, description of this was accurate in that I just wanted you to be happy, and I trusted you to figure it out. It wasn't like, "Oh, no, who's this weird different man?" Like, I'm not that wasn't my vibe. Yeah.
Right. With Alex, it was a very different story because Alex, and I think maybe sons and mothers have a different relationship, but he was 2 years young, he is 2 years younger. He was in college, and when I got divorced, he would joke around and he'd be like, "You're never getting married again, mom. Like you're gonna be single for the rest of your life." And I was like, "Well, I don't really see it that way, but we don't need to get uptight about it now." And we Matthew and I did discuss, meeting Alex, and we met in June, and I think introduced to Alex for the first time that Thanksgiving because Alex was coming home, and it
Right.
didn't go great. It didn't go great. I don't know if you remember this, but
No.
Alex was freaked out. He was completely not comfortable with it, and he even said something like, "Mom, this could be the grandfather to my children." And I was like, "Wait, what? Like, I need to think about that." We were so not serious at that point. I mean, obviously we were exclusive, but I just hadn't gone those extra steps. But Alex is a very thoughtful, serious person, and he was already thinking that through. He wasn't comfortable with Matthew. He wanted time alone with me. He didn't want to hang out with the two of us. In terms of like PDA, he was very uncomfortable. And Matthew and I tend to be touchy feely. And Alex was extremely upset about that.
So, how did you and Matthew like talk about that together?
I think it was just, I mean, Matthew's an extremely sensitive person, so it didn't take much. It was just, hey, we need to just kind of like chill with this and not put it in front of Alex's face and make him uncomfortable. And I'm going to need to spend some time alone with him. And it was no issue. I mean, Matthew,
Right.
dad, this is why I wanted to date someone who was a dad, because he understood, he had his own child who had sensitivities about different things. So there was never an issue. I think it did take Alex a while to lean into it. And I think he did so in a more quiet, sort of like introverted way, whereas you were very excited and more extroverted with Matthew, and kind of like just we're like, "Hey, you're my new dad. This is great," you
I mean,
know?
yeah, you weren't the only one who was excited to, have someone else in the picture. So, yeah, I was pretty excited to have, a father figure who actually is really nice and amazing, and you did a great job. What about on the other side of meeting his kids? Like, he is a kid who's a little younger than Alex and I, so in the beginning, like, he was what, like, in middle school?
He was 12 or 13 when
Right. So,
we were dating.
when as you got more serious, how did you discuss, like, your role in his child's life?
That's evolved over time. I mean, there's a lot that could be a whole nother
I
podcast, but
know.
I think that I had visions of how it was supposed to be, this blended family. And we just actually figured out that we have three daughters and three sons if you count our dogs in. So it is the Brady Bunch.
Oh my god. Amazing.
Um, so I had this vision of sort of like, yeah, like we're all going on vacation. If you remember, we tried going on a vacation once together, which did not go as well as maybe I envisioned it. But the truth is, I have two kids, he has two kids, and the four of you and the two of us have never been in the same room at the same time together.
Oh, wow, that's so true.
Ever. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have one picture of the 6 of us, and so it's been different than what I imagined, but that's okay, and it's been a long time. I mean, we've known each other for 11 years, so the age range now is 24 to 37 between the kids, and 2 of the kids live in a different country. Just the circumstances of I had 2 kids in college, he had 1 kid who was older, who was already an adult. But there was never a time where we lived with kids under the same roof and had to co-parent. So I think every family has a different challenge and a different dynamic.
So what would your advice be to listeners who are navigating this? Like, okay, maybe one person has kids or they both have kids. Like, how can you approach these conversations early in dating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important to understand the relationship between the exes. So, my relationship with my ex is non existent, right? Like, we don't speak, we don't co parent about anything. I've learned through being with Matthew, he's got a relationship at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They used to have family dinners together after they were divorced. He would go and fix a faucet. And they, even till today, I mean, they actually got divorced the same year I got divorced. They co parent very closely. And they talk when they need to. I mean, it's not, we're not doing meals, or I don't
Right.
know her. But I think it's really important to understand the other. If you're dating somebody who has an ex and has children, it's really important, first of all, to be objective. You can't judge somebody else's marriage and somebody else's situation, because they have their own point of view, they have their own needs, they might be with a different partner, there might be, the back and forth of kids shifting households and so on with different rules. I mean, there's so many complexities, but I would say stand back a bit and understand before stepping in with an opinion or trying to create your own ground rules, and then b try not to have a vision or a template for how it's
Mhm.
supposed to be, because it probably, I mean, through friends of mine, I've learned it just never is that way. And also, kids evolve. I see some friends of mine who are dating people or married to people with, adolescents or teenage kids, and how, first of all, siblings can be very different. They might get along with one and not the other. And also, when they're 12 is going to be different than when they're 18, is going to be different than when they're 30. Room for that relationship to evolve, and don't try to be like a savior or someone who's going to have this amazing impact on their life. I mean, you might, but you might
Mhm.
not. You might just
Mhm.
be a third party there for support.
Well, I love this advice. It sounds like you're basically saying don't go in with these expectations or these rigid idea of what it should be, could be, and kind of let it play out, and also trust that I feel like there's a lot of trust here. Like you trusted that my brother would eventually come around to Matthew and like that would happen in its own way. You didn't micromanage it. You didn't like force it in any way. It just kind of happened on its own. And you trusted that it would. You also, I think you let go of expectations of what it could be. Like, are they going to be super close? Like, I'm pretty close with him. Will they be as close? Maybe not. That's okay. Like, everyone has their own relationships. That's fine in this family. And I love our family. Like, I'm so excited to see you at Thanksgiving. This is coming out after, but
Totally. Also, like to that point, when we went on vacation together and tried the blended vacation, Alex was the first one to be like, this didn't work. And if I'm going to go on vacation with the family, I just want to go with you. So I tried to take that in a positive light where he values our time together. It's quality time. And also, as people get older, as you know, there's a point where you can't tell your kids to go on vacation with you anymore. It has to be fun. They have limited
mhm,
amount of time to go. You're going to want to be with their friends. So I'm not going to force it. If he wants to have more quality time with me, I'll take that. And Matthew and I can have a different kind of quality time. And by the way, by the same token, sometimes Matthew says, well, I just want to be alone with you. Like
right.
we, again, this could be a whole nother podcast, but I think you run around a lot trying to be a certain way for the kids and there's a lot of guilt and divorce and a lot of like wanting to make things right. I think where I have come out to, I mean, both my kids are in their 30s now, is like, this is what we're doing. And if you guys want to come along, come along. We can't run around trying to please every kid because every kid is different. You want quality time with me, without me, with everybody, with just certain people. At the end, I think the couple, the adults end up being very tired because they're
Right.
trying to figure out what everybody needs and what it's all going to look like. I think it's better to be like, look, we're doing Thanksgiving at our house. Please come. Love you to be there. I'm
Yeah.
talking about adult kids versus trying to make it this picture perfect moment that you have in your mind. I think there's a lot of readjustment of what good looks like, what family is.
Mhm.
Defining family is a whole evolution, I think, or it has been for me.
So I really appreciate all the tips that you shared for introducing kids to, your new partner, which is just so tricky. And another tricky thing you guys had to navigate, which I'm very impressed by, is that you guys did have a break in your relationship, and then you got back together. So this was how many years in did this happen?
We were 4 years in when we had our breakup.
So what I remember is that you guys, it was like a summer. It was like just a solid like from like May or June to like September or something. Is that right? So can you tell me like when you broke up, was the intention of we're gonna try again, or was it like we're done?
So when we broke up, I had thought about it for a while and I thought, we're finished. This is not the relationship that I wanted. We're 4 years in. It's not going where I need it to go. We weren't fully committed and I decided to break it off.
So when you say fully committed, you mean like you weren't living together at the time and you couldn't agree on an engagement or marriage at that point?
Yeah, it just didn't feel like we were moving in any direction. We just weren't having the conversations that I wanted to have. And it was just kind of like, shit or get off the pot. And so it just, yeah.
I think that's really brave, honestly. Like at that point, how old were you? Like 50 something?
At that point, I was 52.
Yeah. So that's like a really scary thing to do. I think after going through the divorce, going through dating, finding someone great, and then being like, okay, you know what, this isn't going anywhere. That's like so brave. So during that time, did you guys talk at all during the breakup?
So when we broke up, we decided no contact. I read 3 of the books about no contact. It was super painful, and I know you remember this, but as soon as I pulled the trigger on the breakup, I regretted it. And I felt just so much pain. And I thought, okay, this is what I have to go through. We have to, we're used to seeing each other multiple times a day. We live practically next door to each other. Our dogs are pretty much sisters, but I need to go through this period of no contact and just get over it. We broke up for a total of 12 weeks. We didn't have any connection. He actually moved to Brooklyn. His lease was up, so it was like a natural point for him to move on. And so he was out of the neighborhood. I didn't feel like I was going to see him around any corners. But I had to email him about a check that bounced. And that was kind of like, it's like the sticker where you just peel the corner up
Yep.
a little bit. I emailed him like a very factual, logistical email, and he probably emailed back with like one word of kindness. And then I took that and ran with it and emailed back with two words of kindness. And then it just ended up morphing into this letter writing period. And then, eventually phone calls. And then eventually, seeing each other again.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys had a break for a while, like, of really no contact. Then, like you said, the sticker got pulled all the way off and you were talking on the phone. So then how did you decide to get back together? Because, like, this is another thing I get asked about all the time. Like, how do you actually know if you should try again?
I remember after we saw each other, I went to Brooklyn and I remember walking into his apartment building and he was like, "So are we back together?" And I was like, "No, we're not back together. It doesn't work like that." Each of us had moved on. I actually went back on the apps and so did he right
Mhm.
away. I saw him on the apps
I
and
remember that.
that was so painful to see, and it was like, "Well, what am I doing on the apps?" Like, we both, like,
Yeah.
within 48 hours, I think, went back on the apps just because, I don't know, it's desperation, it's pain, it's all of this stuff. But, no, I mean, I said, "No, we're not back together. Things have to be exponentially different for us to continue in a relationship. Otherwise, we're just gonna it hasn't been that long. 12 weeks is not that much. We're just gonna pick up where we left off, and we're gonna fall into our old habits, and we're gonna be nowhere." So we decided to really do some things differently, and the first thing that we did was get a couples counselor.
Okay, did you suggest that or did he suggest that? Who came up with that idea?
I think I did, and we decided that together we would interview a couple, that we both had to agree on. It couldn't be his therapist or my therapist. It had to be a
A
neutral party
neutral.
who
Right.
specialized in couples counseling. And I remember we went to the first couples counselor, and the vibe was, for me, all wrong. And we walked out, and I said, "What do you think?" And he was like, "Fine." I was like, "No, no, no. Like, we can't go to her. We need to keep looking." And we found someone amazing, incredible. I don't know if we'd be together without that couples counselor. She had a minimum of 2 hours per appointment, and we really
Wow.
needed that. She made us sit, eye to eye, like, face our chairs towards each other and asked us some really hard questions. And
Wow.
besides going to couples counseling, we decided to kinda destroy some things from, like, pre-breakup. So, for example, we got rid of our old anniversary date. We decided not to use the nicknames that we had from before. We call it BU, breakup. So,
Yeah.
like, pre-BU and post-BU. We had like a bonfire and burned some things.
I
And
didn't know that. That is so interesting.
yeah.
I love that. I mean, I feel like I love this like you sharing this because it really shows how much you have to change, not just emotionally, but physically. Like you got rid of things. You kind of like took an axe to some of the things you had and just really thought about more intentionally what you wanted to do moving forward. And I think people who are considering getting back together with an ex don't necessarily consider all of those moves.
Yeah, and I would say one of the most impactful points of our therapy was when the therapist would say, "Now look at each other and tell each other if you're all in." And I remember he looked at me and he said, "I am not all in."
Mm.
I was like, "Okay, I am so grateful to know where you are. It hurts, but it's so much better to know that somebody's not all in than to think that they are and kind of wonder and kind of make plans around someone being all in." And eventually we looked at each other and said, "Yeah, I'm all in."
How long did that take?
I'd say 3 or 4 months.
of the therapy? Like, was it weekly therapy?
Yeah, it was once a
Yeah.
week as long as we could make it, and, you know, one of the things was, it's nice that you have a toothbrush at your place and at my place, but eventually we just need to have 1 toothbrush.
Right. That's what I remember, that was your sticking point of, like, moving forward, of living together, like, making that leap, so and eventually you did. You guys now live in your apartment, and then you got married like, that's kind of like, you got married the next year after that breakup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, things moved pretty quickly once you took an axe and started over with some new things.
What are you gonna learn? We had already known each other for 4 years. What are you gonna
Mhm.
learn that you didn't know before? Nothing.
Right. I fully
Um,
agree. What advice do you have for people who are in that moment of like, okay, we split. They're asking me if I want to get back together. I'm thinking about it. What's some advice you have for that?
God, it's so different, but I think it's really thinking about life with or without that person. Just thinking, I just kept asking myself, you know, can I go on without this person? Can I be okay? Can I be happy? There's always the feeling of there's somebody better, you know, especially in a place like New York City. Everybody's looking over their shoulder, thinking, comparing, wondering, what would it be like to be with that person? And I think that as you get older, you start to value different things. But I did a lot of soul searching. I think really just journaling, writing things down about what your own values are and whether, I know you did this too, but whether that person, it's all about meeting the other person's needs. So does that person meet your needs? And can you live with the way the person is? I think the most
Right.
important
Acceptance.
point
Yeah.
is, you know, we all don't need to get into relationships where the objective is to have somebody be a different person. And that's really hard. That's hard for me, even still. It's like, oh, you know, I wish things were a little bit different, or I wish you were a little more this or that. And people can change, but they're not going to change who they are and their character. At their core, they're going to be the same. But
That's
yeah,
great advice, and I also wanna point out, like, something I noticed watching you go through this and hearing you talk about it now is, like, you didn't it didn't doesn't seem like you were giving yourself any pressure or a timeline or a deadline to figure this out, like, you guys were doing the therapy, but it wasn't, like I don't know, it doesn't I feel like sometimes when we're in these heartbreak moments, it's like we have to take action immediately. We need to figure it out and solve it right away, but you were willing to sit in the discomfort a little bit and get in the shit and figure it out.
yeah, and look, what was different for us is my biological clock wasn't ticking. You
Right.
know, I didn't have any of that. We already had kids, and so the it was open-ended for us in terms of a timeline and figuring stuff out. We didn't have a budget cap on therapy where it was like, you know, past this amount, we're not going to invest anymore. And I think that a good therapist is really key. I mean, there were certain points in the therapy where if somebody wanted to say, like, this isn't going to work, or I don't want to go for, you know, she constantly kept checking in, like, do you choose each other? Are you choosing him?
Mm,
Are you choosing her? Is this your person? And I
wow.
think that was really important to hear,
Yeah,
you know, a third party is just very key in that kind of process.
I love it. I love this conversation. I learned so much. I'm sure listeners have learned a lot too. I know you're not out in the dating world anymore, but from what you see with your friends, from what you see just in New York City, what do you want to see more of in today's dating culture?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think it depends what age. Like, you mean for my age,
Sure, yeah. Let's do
for
your age.
for people who are divorced? I think people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s and up who have already had a marriage, I think sometimes they assume that they can't love again. They assume that maybe they're too picky or they're not going to find somebody who fits into their lifestyle. So I'd like to see more openness. Like, I have some friends who are my age and they don't date. I think that they've gotten used to not dating, and I think in their minds they're too picky, or nobody can really meet their standards. And also, they have gotten very busy. Like, they do a lot of solo travel. I think single friends go out with single friends, which is great. But I think that, and look, they might not, I mean, maybe I'm layering a judgment on top that, you know, people should be in couple. I think
Yeah,
that,
I mean, this is for people who are dating, looking for long-term
A
relationship.
lot.
Obviously, that's not everyone, but
No.
yes, I hear what you're
I
saying.
I do have a bias that as we get older, we need companionship. And there's different forms of love, there's romantic love. And I think at my stage, a lot of it comes down to like having somebody to be a companion, to talk to travel with, to have fun with, to celebrate, and not have kids with, and not go through those years with. So I wish that some of my single friends, men and women, put their guard down a little bit. And
Mhm.
this is just a note. I mean, this is more of a fantasy of what I'd like to see. But I think, and this is again totally about my age group, but I wish there were more single places for fun. Like there's no clubs
Yeah,
where
like third
you can just
spaces.
go out and be
Yeah.
50 plus and feel like you're part of, a really fun, vibrant scene in New York City. I think a lot is built for 20 something year olds. So I'd like to see that evolve so that there's more opportunities to meet people who are more my age and single.
I love it. Well, where can we find more of you, Daniela?
Well, you can find me on Happy in Transit, happy underscore in underscore transit on Instagram. I'd
What do
love
you
to
talk
hear.
about there?
Yeah, so that started as my silver transition account. I ditched the dye in 2020 and I started talking about my transition from dyed hair to silver hair and found out that it's about a lot more than hair. It's just about, figuring out who you are. And I mean, I think, what I want to say to everybody is life in my mind is just a constant evolution and it's a reinvention of who we are at every stage. So who we were when we were 21 is not 30, 40, 50. I'm actually almost 60 and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm actually looking forward to 60 more than any other decade. I don't know why, but I
That's
feel
awesome.
like there's a lot of freedom and I feel lucky. So I know that was a long way
No,
around.
I love it. I want more positivity. There needs to be more positivity about aging in the world, which is why I'm so happy that you have Happy in Transit and you're talking about this and putting it out there for people. So if you want to follow Daniela, you can find her at Happy in Transit. I will link it below. And thanks again for this conversation. This has been amazing.
Thank you. You're amazing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share.